This Geography of Births video is a quick look at how earthquakes affect people and the environment. We're going to really clearly sort things into short term and long term and how people respond. We're going to use the Chile earthquake for our case study, which you might have done a bit on before. This is going to push it a little bit further and go into greater depth. Before we start, there's a picture on the screen to get your brain going. Really clearly, that's a roadway, or it was before the earthquake. What you should be looking for is what impact can you see? What can you see in the picture? What are the likely impacts? Remember, roads aren't just roads. Quite often, underneath roads, there are various other things that are quite important. Have a think about that and then push on with the video. We're focusing here on the Chile earthquake of 2010. Chile is on the west coast of South America. The earthquake's epicenter, the middle where it hit, was located 200 miles southwest of the capital city, Santiago. It happened because the Nazca plate subducted under the South American plate. If you look to the right of the screen, you'll see a diagram of what that looks like. One plate, the oceanic crust, subducts or dives under the continental crust, and as it ducks under, it goes back into the earth and kind of melts away into the magma under the planet. This is a destructive plate margin, and it often causes earthquakes. Key facts in the middle of the screen. It happened on Sunday the 27th of February 2010. It was an 8.8 magnitude quake, 22 miles below the Pacific Ocean. And then the shockwaves would have been felt rising up through the land into the city. There were some key primary effects that you ought to remember. One of the things that's best to do with these slides is to listen to the information, then to pause, have a second look yourself, then cover the screen or flick your monitor off, write down as much as you can remember, then go back over it to see what you've missed. That's how you ought to be using this video in order to support learning this case study. So, the earthquake affected 6 regions of the country, holding 80% of the country's population. Its destruction affected mainly urban areas, towns and cities. Although the hospitals in Santiago didn't see much damage, the south of the country saw 6 hospitals collapse and 2 were severely damaged. Roads were blocked by debris, bridges collapsed, and there were reports of lorries falling into gaps created in the ground. Communication lines, electricity and water pipes have been cut off. More than 15 million people were left without water or electricity. The death toll reached just over 800. However, no specific number has been given, with the worst hit area being just south of Santiago, where 541 people were killed. Remember, pause here, scribble down as much as you can, then double check again so that you're not missing stuff and ideas are going into your long-term memory. Now, countries respond differently to earthquakes. As you build up more case studies, we will also look at Nepal, which is much poorer and responded very differently. I've sorted your responses into short-term, things that happened immediately, and longer-term responses, which happened, as the name suggests, in the longer term, a little while after the earthquake. Now, it's really easy to work this out. If your house fell down in an earthquake and you were trapped in it, immediate responses might involve digging you out, taking you to hospital, making sure you were all right, making sure you'd got somewhere to stay when you came out of hospital. Longer term responses, you're going to want another house, and therefore, at some point, you've got to claim on your insurance, you've got to rebuild your house, you've got to reconnect your electric and your water, but those things take time. They don't just happen 30 minutes afterwards. So immediate responses, saving lives quite often, longer term responses, often to do with property. Let's have a look at some. On the left-hand side of the screen, you can see the immediate responses. The government in Chile were quite quick to respond, and they started the clear up and the search really quickly. Emergency hospitals were quickly set up, and the World Health Organization appealed to other countries to donate equipment. However, emergency services found it difficult to access remote areas. Obviously, roads and railways have been damaged by the earthquake. The army were called in, and the government were able to bring 12,000 tons of relief to citizens within 10 days. America and other countries sent ships with aid into Chile within 24 hours, supporting the relief effort. Clearly, if you're going to get ambulances to people, you need a road. So they repaired the major north-south highway very quickly using metal plates, meaning that they could get cars and transportation to the areas that needed it. Longer-term responses. The government acted quickly to make sure that 10 days after the quake, more than 90% of the homes in the disaster area had power and water back. It's cost the global insurance industry $7 billion. But Chile has quite a high rate of insurance, which means that lots of people had insurance and could quickly begin to reconstruct their lives. The government has set up a 4-year recovery plan to ensure all quality of life was equal for all citizens, focused mainly on rebuilding 200,000 homes. Chile has quite a strong economy. It makes lots of money from trade and from its manufacturing and farming, and therefore it didn't have to rely heavily on foreign aid because they could do a significant amount of the work using their own finances. Now we're going to look at an exam style question. I want you to try and explain the long and short term responses to an earthquake using one case study. Remember, at this point it might be a good idea to rewind the video, whiz through the facts we've just gone through and get them really secure in your brain before you try to write them down, because we know that if you have to think about what you're doing and think about how to write it down, you find that more difficult. So what you want to do is get your content secure first, know your stuff, then come back to this to write it down. There'll be some sentence stems to help you as we go through. Have a look at what short-term responses focus on. Remember, I talked about saving lives and immediate threats to health and well-being. What did the government do in Chile? How did the army help? What did the US send? Why did they rebuild roads? And give me an example. Then explain how those actions helped to save lives. Go on to longer-term responses. Tell me what the response is focused on. Here you're looking at property and rebuilding. Tell me about housing. Tell me about how insurance helped. Tell me how the strong economy meant that the country could react well to an earthquake. And then you're finished. You've got a strong case study to revise from, ready for your exams. Well done, you've worked hard. For some further information, there are 2 YouTube links here. They're not easily clickable. I'm really sorry, you'll have to do that annoying thing of copying them off the video into your browser.